Anyway.
You probably wouldn't remember.
I don't know. Okay. So, tonight's shir, this is a new material. I've never done a shir like this before. What I'm going to try to do tonight. And I'm not sure how long it's going to be. I'm not sure how convincing it's going to be. But we're going to have a good time with it anyway. What I decided to do was I decided to take a look at machlokot. I got the idea during Bekiyas. This past week, during Bekiyas, we were discussing the machlokas Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, and we're going to look at this machlokas. It's one of the even though it's a halachic machlokas, it has an agadic flavor to it, and it got me thinking. So the machlokas that we're going to start with is that one. There's a machlokas between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel that we did in Bekiyas this week about the text of the bracha that we say over the candle at Havdalah. Okay, machlokas in the Mishnah and brachas. The Shammai Bet guys for whom Bekiyas was a long, long time ago in brachas. You might not remember what it said there. Do you remember what it said there, Doug? There you go. The machlokas goes like this. Beit Shammai says that the proper bracha over the candle on Motzei Shabbos is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shebara Ma'or Ha'esh. Shebara Ma'or Ha'esh. And Beit Hillel says that the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Borei Me'orei Ha'esh. So there are two distinctions. Listening? There are two distinctions between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel's versions of that bracha. Distinction number one is that Beit Shammai says that the word bara, which means who created, past tense, is said in the past tense, and Beit Hillel says borei, that we say it in the present tense conjugation of the verb. Second distinction is that Beit Shammai holds that we say ma'or ha'esh, the light, singular, of the fire, and Beit Hillel says that we say it in the plural, borei ma'orei ha'esh, the lights. So again, Beit Hillel is present tense and plural, and Beit Shammai has past tense and singular. So when we're doing this in Bekiyas shir, I made a comment. And shir was like, this is obvious. This is a machloket that's like, yes, it's a halachic machloket, but it clearly has a feel to it that there's some sort of philosophical issue going on here. What the text of the bracha over fire is in Motzei Shabbos. So it got me thinking that it might be an idea to take a look at. Obviously, there's many machlokot between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel and halacha. We hit them everywhere, but I wanted to take a look at where are there machlokot between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel in agadatas. Do they argue about agadic issues ever? So what I did was I have a CD-ROM on the computer in the office that has. It's not like the big Bar Ilan CD-ROM. It has some basic source material. It has very comprehensive texts of Midrashei Agadah, like Medrash Rabbah, Yaakov Shimoni, Medrash Tanchuma, all the famous Midrashim. Yeah, the Dafka software. So I typed in Shammai, because you type in Hillel, you're going to get everything about Hillel also, because it's spelled the same way. So that wouldn't have been a good hit. I would have had too many false hits there. So I typed in Shammai, and I also typed in Bet, Chupchik Shin, because that's often how Beit Shammai is written. The list was identical, and I got a bunch of hits, and I looked only in Midrashei Agadah. I got a bunch of hits. A lot of them were duplicates because a lot of stories appear in 3 or 4 different places. The same story. Basically, it boiled down to about 4 or 5 machlokot Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel total in Agadata. There are not that many machlokot in Agadata. We're not going to deal with We're not going to deal with all 4 or 5 of these. There's one that I had a very hard time sorting out, and I don't know how it fits in. Not that it's like I understand it didn't fit in, but it's a very long one, and I just didn't. It requires further study. I'll mention it later, just for the sake of being thorough. The other ones we'll deal with. So I think the best structure for this shir is that I'm just going to tell you the midrashim first. I'll lay out, these are the midrashim, these are the disputes between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. What we're then going to do is we're going to take a look at a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, which does not present actually a machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, but it presents a story in which Shammai and Hillel have different reactions to a situation. Okay? And, more importantly, in that Gemara, it actually states what their traits are. Okay? We're then going to take that Gemara and an understanding of that Gemara through the eyes of Rav Kook. We're then going to go back to the machloket about the bracha over Borei Morei Ha'esh, using that same approach. And then, once we've done that, hopefully we'll have a working philosophical distinction between these two schools of thought, and then we'll go look at those original midrashim that I started this year with, and I'll present to you my ideas about what those midrashim mean. Okay, there's a couple people here who were part of my conversations this week about a couple of these midrashim. I had one conversation with Dovi about one of them. I had a conversation with Adrian about one of them. Not the same midrash. You guys didn't discuss the same midrash with me. But, because I've been thinking about these midrashim all week. Did I tell you any of these wild midrashim? Anyway, they're kind of riddles. But here we go. Let's start with Bereshit Rabbah. Bereshit Rabbah is a machloket. This machloket is cited, it appears in a bunch of places. This is the most frequently cited Agadic machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, the most famous Agadic machloket of Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. It also appears in Shas. It appears in the Gemara Maseches Chagiga. But the text as it appears in Bereshit Rabbah includes a very important component that does not appear in the text as it appears in the Gemara, which is a third opinion that disagrees with both Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So here we go. The machloket is as follows. Right at the beginning of Bereshit Rabbah, Parsha Aleph, section Tet Vav. Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai omrim hashamayim nivru tchila. Beit Shammai says the heavens were created first. V'achar kach nivrei ha'aretz, and then the earth. Okay? U Beit Hillel omrim. Beit Hillel say ha'aretz nivrei tchila. Beit Hillel says the earth was created first. V'achar kach shamayim, and then the heavens. Elu mevi'im tam l'divreihem, ve'elu mevi'im tam l'divreihem. They each bring a reason. They each bring a svar. Al da'ateon, the Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai brings their opinion. What's their approach? De'inu namrin, that they said, Hashamayim nivru tchila, v'achar kach ha'aretz, mashal lemelech, here's Beit Shammai's reason, mashal lemelech she'asa lo kisei. It's a mashal to a king who makes himself a throne, u'misha asa'o, and only after he makes the throne, asa piforin shelo, then he makes a footstool. And then he cites the pasuk in Yeshaya, famous pasuk you guys have heard, Hashamayim kis'i, v'ha'aretz hadom raglai. The earth is my, and the skies are, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Okay. So, the natural thing is to make the throne first and then the footstool, so that's what makes sense. V'al de Beit Hillel, and according to Beit Hillel, who said that the earth was created before the heavens, mashal lemelech shebana paltin, it's a mashal to a king who built a palace. Mishebanat atachtonim, achar kach banat elyonim. First you build the bottom, and then you build the top. Okay, so earth comes before heaven. So too, kach. They cite a pasuk where it said, "V'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim." And there's a little bit of discussion by Yehuda Bar Ilai. And then, skipping ahead about 5 lines, it says, Amar Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai weighs in. Okay? He says, Tameani. He says, I'm confused. Tamea, like Pitmiya, right? I'm confused. Hey, Achnech Lekua, Vota Olam, Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. How did Beit Shammai Beit Hillel have a machloket about heaven and earth, about the creation of heaven and earth? Ella, rather, Sha'ani Omer Shnehem Lo Nivru Ela Ki'ilfas V'Kisuya. So rather, the heaven and earth were created like a pot and its cover. What does that mean? When a pottery pot that's going to have a cover is made, the potter makes the whole thing solid and then slices the cover off, so that they know it's a perfect fit. Because if you're making things out of pottery and you just make a pot with an opening on top, and you put it in the oven, and afterwards it's going to change shape and size a little bit it's going to change size a little bit in the firing of it, and then you make a lid, your chances that the lid is going to be a nice firm fit on the cover are very slim. But if you fire the whole thing as one solid piece, and then afterwards you skillfully slice it off, you have a cover that automatically fits perfectly. That's how they would make them. So the Rosh Bar Yochai, we don't know as much from poverty. In the ancient world, this was something that was a normal household behavior, making a pot. So he says, what Bar Yochai says, he says neither of them was made first. There are two parts of a whole, they were made simultaneously. Okay? And then there's a lengthy discussion by his son, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, going on and on about how, anytime you see Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son, going on and on about how, listing other things in Torah where you have things that are equal, and sometimes one is stated first and sometimes the other is stated first. Because, remember, Beit Shammai and Hillel each brought a pasuk that implied they were right. So he says, so too with Moshe and Aaron, they're equal. Sometimes one of them is first, sometimes the other one's first. So too Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they're in all different orders, they're all equal. He gives a list of things that are equal, essentially explaining his father's words, and he says he's explaining his father's words as saying that my father means to say that the two things are equal. Okay? Yes?
Beit Shammai didn't bring the pasuk, the first pasuk of the Torah?
No. Not in this version of the Medrash. In other ones he did. Okay. That's Medrash number 1. Yes?
You probably will mention this your answer, but what kind of objection is, how can Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai have
I will deal with that. You're right. Okay. Yeah. I will deal with that. That's not usually the way an opinion in a third opinion in Machloket shows up.
Is it possible?
What are you arguing about? What kind of business is this? I'm shocked. What are they arguing? Right, exactly. Don't worry, we'll deal with it. Next one. Next Medrash in Breshit Rabbah Yud Bet Yud Dalet. Yud Bet Yud Dalet. Okay? This one is mamish a riddle. Okay? This is like a total riddle here. Here we go. Also about creation of heaven and earth. B'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. It's like that pasuk in Breshit. Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai omrim machshava balayla. This is talking about creation. Beit Shammai says machshava balayla u ma'aseh bayom. The thought of creation was at night. The action of creation is during the day. Adam, let's see if you can figure out this matter. Okay? Beit Shammai says, Machshava balayla, ma'aseh bayom. Ubeit Hillel omrim, Machshava u'ma'aseh bayom. Beit Hillel says, the thought and the action are during the day. Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Tmeani, I'm shocked. How can Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai argue? How are they arguing about the creation of heaven and earth? Ella, rather, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, now third opinion, Machshava, Bein Bayom Bein Balayla, thought is both during the day and at night. When's Maaseh? Umaaseh im dimdumei chama. An action was done. Now, dimdumei chama means the reddening of the sun. Dimdum is like blood, adom. Dimdumei chama means it sometimes means sunrise and sometimes means sunset. It's when the sky is reddish. Okay? So Beit Shammai says thought at night, action during the day. Beit Hillel says thought and action during the day. Rosh Bar Yochai says, well, what on earth are they arguing about? Thought, night and day are both times of thought. Action only takes place at sunrise and sunset. What does this mean? Phil is confused. Baruch Hashem. I'm happy you have a confused look on your face because it means you're paying attention. If you weren't confused, it means you didn't hear what I said. Because this is Is anyone here not confused by this medrash? This is completely confusing. Adam, you thinking about the medrash? It's a good brain game. I don't know what it is. Okay, weiter. Seems simple to Shimshon Selig.
Meaning I know the answer.
All right, good.
Maybe it's a reflection on himself.
Vayikra. Now we go to Vayikra Rabbah. Next medrash. Vayikra Rabbah. Vayikra Rabbah Yudalid Tet. Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. Here's another riddle. If you haven't finished thinking about the first one, put it out of your mind for a second so you can hear this next one. This is one I had a discussion with Adrian about. Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai Omrim. Beit Shammai. And the pshat we came up with, we confused the two opinions in coming up with the pshat, so it ended up not working. But I modified it, so we're going to make it work anyway. Here we go. Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai Omrim. Beit Shammai says, listen to this. This is wild. Lo kishem sheyitzirat havlad ba'olam hazeh, kach yitzirato ba'olam haba. He says, the way babies are made, the way embryos or children are formed in this world is not the way they're going to be formed in the next world. Ba'olam hazeh, in this world, matchil ba'oru b'basar, it starts with flesh and skin. V'gomer b'gidim v'atzamot, and it ends, in this world, it starts with flesh and skin, and it ends with bones and sinews. The bones and sinews come later. Okay? You start with the flesh and the skin, and the bones and the sinews are the later stage. Okay? Aval la'atid lavo, but in the future, in the end of days, in the world to come, matchil b'gidim v'atzamot, then we're going to start with the bones and the sinews. We'll go mer, and we'll finish ba'or, and we'll finish with the skin. Okay? Okay, and then Beit Hillel Omrim. Beit Hillel say, Kishem shi'yitzirato shel ha'adam ba'olam hazeh, kach yitzirato ba'olam haba. He says, no. Beit Hillel says, it's going to be the same thing. Ba'olam hazeh, matchil ba'or u'basar, v'gomer b'gidim v'atzamot, l'tid lavo k'mochem. He says, nowadays, we start by the baby starts with flesh and skin and finishes with sinews and bones, and in the future it's going to be the same thing. Rishon Bar Yochai doesn't object to this one. He's not involved here. Okay, that's the machloket. It's a pretty wild machloket also. Okay? That's the third machloket. Alright. Then we'll leave it at that. The Abbas Rabbi Nosson will leave out. Okay. Now, in Masechet Shabbat, on Daf Lamed Aleph, Shabbos Lamed Aleph, there is a series of stories about Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Yes. A series of stories about people coming to Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Oh, this is not to scare him. There's also the two guys who are trying to get Hillel angry. Right? There's all these stories about Hillel and Shammai in Daf Lamed Aleph. I'm telling you right now, I'm not dealing with every single story. There are other things. This is the kind of shir that I imagine when I give it next year, it'll be a little different. You know, as I continue to learn more about this topic, I'm sharing with you what I have so far. It's enough for a shir. There's a series of stories of people who come to Beit Shammai and Hillel either to learn Torah or to convert to Judaism. There's a number of these stories. One of them is, probably the most famous of them, is the following. And again, it appears all over the place. It says, Shuv Ma'aseh ben Ochri Echad. What's funny about this list of stories, a whole bunch of stories of Goyim who want to convert. There's a couple different ones. And at the end of the whole narrative in the Gemara, all the converts meet each other. They all get together. The converts from the various stories are all have a shmooze. Okay? Let me find it here. Hold on a second. There's all these stories. I want to make sure I get the right one. Yeah. Shuv Ma'aseh ben Ochri Echad shebal lifnei Shammai. There's a story about a guy who came before Shammai. I'll tell you two of them. I'll tell you two of these stories. Okay, there's a story about a guy who comes before Shammai. Amar le Gaireni, amanat shel tlamdeni kol haTorah kula k'shani umed al regel achad. He says to Shammai, convert me on condition that you could teach me the whole Torah while I stand here on one foot. You know the story? So what does he answer him, Phil? What does Shammai say to him? Get out of here! But he says it to him in the Gemara's language is very strange. Listen to the Gemara's language. So it says, Dechafo ba'amat habinyan shebiyado. It says, Shammai pushed him away with the builder's measuring stick that was in his hand. Okay?
What does he
And I'll tell you what amat habinyan literally is. There's a discussion in a couple places in Shas of various amma measurements depending on what we're dealing with. Dovi knows Mishnayos, he knows his Mishnayos. And the builder's amma is 6 tvachim. There's other things where an amma is 5 tvachim. The builder's amma is 6 tvachim. He had like a yardstick. He had a 6 tefach long stick that was measured perfectly, exactly 6 tvachim. And the builder would use it to measure things. It was like a ruler. It had markings on it at the various tvachim. And that's called amat habinyan. It was just like if you were talking to someone who builds things, he's got a level, he's got clamps, he's got other things that he uses to build. And amat habinyan is a measuring tool used by builders. So it says Shammai pushed him away with the amat habinyan. It makes a good weapon if you're a teacher, like some sticks, 6 tvachim long. Okay, I'm scared. But that's what it says. It pushed him away with the amat habinyan. Okay, so what does the guy do? Ba lifnei Hillel, he goes before Hillel. Shimshon, you're distracting me with all your. First you were chatting with him, now you're chatting with this guy. It's okay if you chat, but go sit with a Lazar in the cheap seats. Where's a Lazar? Where'd he go? You see what happens?
I'd rather not.
See what happens?
I'd rather not. For the record.
Ba lifnei Hillel, he came before Hillel. Gairei. And Hillel converted him to Judaism. Hillel converted him. Amar lo, and Hillel said to him, Da'alach sanei l'chavarach lo ta'avid. Whatever you don't like, don't do to other people. Zohi kol Torah kula. That's the whole Torah. Eidach pirushahu. The rest of it's all a commentary on that. Zil Gemara, go learn. Okay. Then there's another story of a guy who comes into the Beis Medrash. He was passing by the Beis Medrash. It says that he heard the person teaching, reading about all the big day kahuna, and he thought, wow, they're so beautiful. Kohen Gadol's got all the cool clothes. So he walks into the Beis Medrash, goes over to Shammai, says, convert me so that I can become Kohen Gadol. So it says, Dachafo ba'amat habinyan. He pushed him away with his favorite weapon. And this is Ba lifnei Hillel. Hillel converted him. And then Hillel said to him, look, I know you want to be Kohen Gadol, but in order to become the leader of the whole people, you got to start from ABC. You got to start from scratch. So let's first start learning the rules. So they're learning and learning and learning. They get up to the point where it says, Hazar HaKarev Yumat, a person who's a non-Kohen who goes into the Beis HaMikdash is liable of a death penalty. And he goes, oh my gosh, I can't be Kohen Gadol. Okay? But, so he realizes that. He says, if David HaMelech, who's not a Kohen, he's not allowed into the Beis HaMikdash, Kal V'chomer, and I, who's a Ger, won't be allowed in. And this goes on for a little bit. So then he says to Hillel, he thanks Hillel for being Makarev him and exposing him to it. Because at that point he'd been learning for a long time. He already loved it. Okay. Wait, what did you ask? Can I read more stories? I don't have an explanation for more stories. And there's a lot here, and we still have a lot to do. So this could be like a 4 hours here, but it's cool. But I want to try to it'll be too much to handle, too many balls to juggle at the same time. Okay, so now, what this whole series of stories began with a statement in the Gemara. that said, Tana Rabbanan, and this is the last line on the previous Amud. It's Lamed, Amud Bet, Lamed. Most of the stories, it fills up almost the entire Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph. 31a, Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, and Shabbat. That's where all these stories are. And the last line on the previous Amud is the beginning of it. In the middle of the line, there's 2 dots, and it says, Tana Rabbanan. And here's where we're going to start heading towards a solution to all of these midrashim. It's going to be a long solution, so sit tight. La'olam yehei adam anvitan ke-Hillel, va'al yehei kapdan ke-Shammai. A person should always be, la'olam yehei adam, a person should always be modest like Hillel, and not be, a kapdan means a stern, it means a stickler for the rules, meticulous, a kapdan. It also implies easily angered, okay? A kapdan, like Shammai. So the Gemara opens it seems quite clearly, with an approbation, a haskama, to behave like, a suggestion to be like Hillel, and a criticism of Shammai. Don't be like Shammai. Right? Shammai was a great tzaddik. Rav Kook says a beautiful thing on this line, and I think it's the key to this whole thing. This is what Rav Kook says. He says, modesty is a very nice midah. That midah brings with it, you have mercy on people, you judge them well. The person who's modest judges people positively. Hillel wants to bring people closer. He says the problem, and he says, when you accept other people's flaws, and you're willing to bear them, which is a very nice midah, that's the midah of an anam. There's a flaw with that midah. It's still a great midah to have, but there is a flaw in it. We have to understand what the flaw is. And the flaw of that midah is it supports falsehood. It allows falsehood to continue. It gives it a pat on the back and says it's okay. Right? It allows falsehood to continue. I'll put it to you a slightly different way, in a way that might be easier to get our heads around, and it'll round out the picture. The Arizal said about Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and this apparently does not appear in the writings of the Arizal, but everyone says the Arizal said it, including Talmidim of the Arizal. It started from the Arizal, and it's become, in all the Hasidic books where they talk about Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, they say this, the Malbim says it, Rav Kook himself quotes this Arizal. The Arizal said Beit Shammai is Midat Hadin, and Beit Hillel is Midat Haracham. Okay, Beit Shammai is din, is judgment, and Beit Hillel is mercy. What's wrong with mercy? Mercy is actually a compromise on truth. Right? You did X, you deserve that punishment. I don't give you the punishment. That's nice, but it's a compromise on truth. It's a compromise on emet. If there are evil people in the world and God decides to be merciful and doesn't punish them right away, that's all very nice. God's being nice. The problem with God being nice is it causes all of us to lose faith. We look around and go, it looks like no one's in charge. It looks like there isn't a quid pro quo. If every single person got paid well for his mitzvot immediately and got punished for his averot immediately, that would be pure din, and truth would reign. There'd be nothing would be vague. Hashem, so the irony is, Hashem being nice, or people being nice, allows falsehood to continue. Think about a high school classroom with a teacher who has a different demeanor than, say, me or Rav Ram. Sees a hand go up, and a kid puts up his hand, and he says something completely idiotic. And the teacher goes, "Oh, that's very interesting." Okay? Now, no, it's not. It's stupid and it's false. But he doesn't want to turn the kid off. Baruch Hashem, someone's actually paying attention, right? So, Rachamim is a very important midah. But let's understand, at the same time as it's a great midah, and the Gemara is telling us that we should be modest, we should be humble. It allows falsehood to prevail. Okay? It's still the suggested midah. On the other side, being a stickler and being like Shammai, which we're being told not to do, obviously we know what the flaws in it are, that it turns people off and it's rude. And on the other hand, Emet is absolutely served by that midah. So, Rav Kook says, why is the Gemara telling us to be like Hillel and not like Shammai? He says, L'olam yehei adam. Why is that using that language? A person should always strive to be like. He says, you know why? And this is a cool Musar point here. He said, if your average person, if everyone is being nice and being an anav, for virtually everybody, that's a good midah to have, and it's not going to be misused. It's pretty hard to misuse humility and kindness. But it is quite easy to misuse kapdanut, to misuse the tough stickler. If a person isn't on a very high level and really not a jerk, but just being very honest to the truth, it's much easier to mess that one up and be a jerk about it and actually not use that midah well. So basically, the safer road to take is to try to be an anav like Hillel. Yes, there are great people, great thinkers who have also exemplary midot and an exemplary sense of truth, who they have to be the ones to reinforce the truth. But that's not a midah your average person should strive for, because they're gonna end up just being, plain old jerks. You know these people, right? A kaptan, don't touch my stuff. What do you mean? No. You know those people who nitpick when you say you use incorrect grammar and they tell you right? Don't be that way. Most people just turn into jerks when they do that. So it's better to strive to be like Hillel, but let's understand the value of the flaw in Hillel and the value of Shammai. Let's understand it. That's what Rav Kook says in this story. He then... okay. Now, I'd like to go back at this point. We'll come back to the line about the measuring stick at the end. Let's go back now to the first thing I mentioned in the shir when we started, sort of as an introductory comment, about the bracha over the candle. Borei Morei Ha'esh. Adam, you've read this piece in Rav Kook? Borei Morei Ha'esh? I told it over to you last year at some point. I think as part of the shir by Hanukkah. I think I told it over. Maybe? I told it to you during Bikiyas, maybe. Okay. So Rav Kook does amazing work on this Borei Morei Ha'esh, and he says as follows. Rav Kook says on Borei Morei Ha'esh, on that bracha, he says, what is fire? Let's start with that. It's a real Rav Kook way to start the discussion. Okay, first let's understand what fire is. And why are we lighting a fire on Motzei Shabbos? He says fire means human productivity. Everything that human beings make, every form of technology, everything that we do to manipulate nature involves fire. Right? If you look around you at everything in front of you, anything made of plastic, anything made of metal, right? This item here, every single thing in here was turned from natural sand and whatever minerals on earth or petroleum products that made this plastic and metal and silicone, whatever's here, all involved fire at some point in the process. Heat. Okay? Fire is human creativity. Okay? And that's why we start the Sheish Yemei Masa, we start the 6 days of work by lighting a fire. Back to work. Back to human creativity. That's what the Havdalah candle is. It's reintroducing human action. It says when we start that, we make a statement right away. And that is that God is responsible for all of that. We make a very powerful statement that all the human creativity, all the technological advances, everything that we do in the world, really we understand God's the source of all of it. It all comes from God. God imbued us with the ability to do it. He imbued us with the potential to do it. He holds our hand as we do it. He grants us the ability to do it. It's all from God. He is the Borei Ha'esh. Okay? That's what that bracha is all about. Now, Beit Shammai says the correct way to state that is in the past tense, bara, meaning that when God created the world, He had already included all the potentials for everything, and it was all already predetermined. Everything that human beings were going to do, it was all already part of the plan. It was already part of the potential of the natural system that God put out there. It's all there already. God, it was all there from the get-go. That is what we should be saying. Bara. Beit Hillel says, remember, in the Gemara it says that Beit Hillel holds that Borei implies both. Remember, it didn't say that he holds that it Davka is in the present tense, but in the Gemara, it's that Beit Shammai said say it in the past. Beit Hillel says Borei also means Bara, but it also means Borei, right? Beit Hillel was sort of on the fence there. He was wanting to play both sides. So Beit Hillel says, yeah, it's true that God made it, but that's latent. That's not how we experience it. And therefore, even though Borei implies past tense also, but that's beneath the surface. On the surface, it's present tense. How do human beings experience it? They experience it as an ongoing thing. Yes, it comes from God, but we experience it as like every time we have a new chiddush, we have a new chiddush in our lives, in technology, and what we do and what we make. We experience it as a new thing that God bestowed. So it's Borei. Okay? Beit Shammai says we should say Ma'or. Why should we say Ma'or? Because fire, Rav Kook says fire has two components to it. What are the two components of fire? Light and heat. Two useful things about fire. We need both of those things. We cannot live without either of them. Okay, we need fire provides heat, fire provides light. Beit Shammai says those two things, fire, heat and light, are really both energy. They're both the same thing. It's fire. The fact that, what are you laughing about? They're both. I mean, it's not meaning there are two different characteristics of the same thing, but it's just fire. Fire is just fire. What are you laughing about?
No, it's, I don't know, I think it was chemistry class.
Okay. So, what? Hillel says, it may be true that fire, and Beit Shammai says that the Iker really is the heat. The Iker is the heat. Because the heat that's what you sense, that there's the energy, that's the fire, it's the heat. It happens to also provide light. But that's just a secondary quality of the creation of the energy, of the fire. And as heat is one thing. It can be more intense or less intense, but there aren't different flavors of it. It's heat. Heat is heat. The only distinctions between different heats are the temperature of it, which is a difference in degree, not in essence. So, Hillel says it's true that it's heat, but from the standpoint of the light is what really is the more important aspect of fire for us. There's no human experience without light. If everything's pitch dark, we have no ability to think about anything or learn about anything or be creative about anything. The main thing that fire gives us is light. And light is only meaningful if there are many different colors. If there was only one color of light, we wouldn't be able to see anything. It's the equivalent of it being pitch dark. So light has value in as much as it has many, many different colors going on at the same time. So it's davka, the multiplicity of light, the fact that it contains all the different colors, which allows us to see. You would not be able to see. If white light did not contain all the colors of the spectrum, you would not be able to see. If it only contained one color of the spectrum, you would not be able to see. Fact. Right? Like those, if everything, it's a black background. You can't see anything, It was all... So we only see because of the multiplicity of light. The human experience. Rav Kook takes this another step further, and he says that when Beit Shammai say Chad Nahora Ika Benura, they mean something else as well. That there's one light. So Beit Shammai is also saying that ultimately, all the things that humans do, all the human creativity. Remember, fire is human creativity. Everything that humans do, everything that's going on in the world, everything that God created, ultimately, if you really understand it, you see it as a total unity. It's all part of this one total unity. And Beit Hillel says, that's all very nice and good, but that's not how human beings experience it. And rather, it's an accumulation of details that produces the greatness and the truth at the end. Now, what Rav Kook has put forward here in these last couple pieces we did about, in this discussion of the fire, which he says elsewhere as well, is that Beit Hillel is looking at things from the standpoint of the way human beings experience them, and Beit Shammai is looking at things more from the godly perspective. I discussed this at length earlier in the year when I gave a shir on Hanukkah, about the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, about whether we in the order of the lighting candles. You guys remember this? That Beit Shammai looks at things more from God's perspective, the godly. And when we say God's perspective, it doesn't mean he's putting himself. It means the perspective of the perfect, the objective truth, even if it's not the way humans experience it. And Beit Hillel looks at things more from the standpoint of the way humans experience it. Rav Reuven Margoliot, in his Sefer Nitzot Seor, I mentioned him last week, right? We talked, half the shir was about Rav Reuven Margoliot. Rav Reuven Margoliot, in his book Nitzot Seor, he says, and he brings rayas for this. It's should I explain this? How much time do we have? Do people mind sitting a few extra minutes? Okay. I'll explain this, what he says, before we get back to Midrash. He says something fascinating. Do you remember the story with Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel, where a student came to Rabbi Yeshua and he said, is Mariv a Rashut or a Chovah? And Rabbi Yeshua says it's a Rashut. And then he goes to Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Gamliel says it's a Chovah. And then there's this whole political uproar, and Rabbi Yeshua is embarrassed publicly, and Rabbi Gamliel gets removed, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah gets put in, and then they remove the guard from the door of the Beis Medrash, and that whole long story. So in that story, one of the most disturbing things about the story is that Rabbi Yeshua seems to be lying. Rabbi Yeshua tells Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that Mariv is a Rashut. He was the student. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai then goes to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel says it's an obligation. And then he says, Rabbi Yeshua told me it's a Rashut. He says, get Rabbi Yeshua in here. Rabbi Yeshua comes into the Beis Medrash. Everyone comes into the Beis Medrash. Rabbi Gamliel in front of everybody says to Rabbi Yeshua, is Mariv a Rashut or a Chovah? And he says, it's a Chovah. And he says, but I heard that you said it's a Rashut. He goes, okay, you got me. Was Rabbi Yeshua lying? So Rabbi Margoliot says, he says something interesting. He says a lot of stuff to prove this, so I can't get into all the proofs. But he says, Rabbi Gamliel was a Shammaiist until the Bat Kol came out and said that we have to follow Beit Hillel. And he brings proofs that Rabbi Gamliel was a Shammaiist. He says that's why Rabbi Gamliel had a guard at the door of the Beis Medrash who said, whoever is not perfect cannot come in. Because that was Shammai's approach. That was the Shammai school's approach. Push him away with the measuring stick. Get out of here. You don't belong. Okay? Unless you're emet. Because Beit Shammai is emet.
What it means by the measuring stick, like measuring.
We'll get there. Yeah. We're getting there. You're already figuring it out. Beit Shammai is all about emet. Rabbi Gamliel was all about emet. Rabbi Yeshua changes his mind. Does that mean Hillel is about sheker? No. So Rav Margoliot says, according to Beit Hillel's school, you work with the person you have in front of you. You work with the person you have in front of you, even if it's imperfect. And part of working with the person you have in front of you is that not everyone's going to get the same answer to the same question. If two people ask me a question, they might get different answers depending on the person. Does that sound like a compromise on truth? It sort of does. If two students ask me the same shaila and I give them a different answer, someone would think, is this a legal system or is it not a legal system? How could you give two different people a different answer? So a person who's all about emet says that's not truthful. You're giving different answers. But Beit Hillel says no. You have to deal with the person. Different people can get different answers. So when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, young Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, what did he do all day? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He's just sitting and learning all day long. When he goes to Rabbi Yeshua and says, do I have to daven Mariv, or is it a reshut or a chova? Is it an obligation or is it optional? To him, Rabbi Yeshua says, you know what? For someone like you who sits and learns Torah all day, it's optional. But then when he's brought out in public and is asked, is Mariv optional or is it an obligation? This is what Rav Margaliot explains. He doesn't think that out in public, he's not going to say that it's optional, because then you're going to have people who like yeshiva guys. I don't have to daven Mariv, it's optional. No. So in public, he says it's an obligation. He wasn't lying. He believed that you can give different psaks to different people. Rabbi Yeshua is the same one. This is the same Rabbi Yeshua who looks up at Shammai and says, Lo b'Shamayim hi. Torah's not in heaven. In that other famous story, you got to deal with the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is not always perfect. That's the Rabbi Yeshua / Hillelian approach. And who is Rabbi Yeshua arguing with in that famous story of Lo b'Shamayim hi? Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is from the school of Shammai. Objective truth. What did God say on Sinai? That's all that matters. The objective truth is what matters, according to the Shammai school. So now, if we go back to the original Midrashim, it's starting to come into focus a little bit. And Beit Shammai says that heaven was created first, before earth. And Beit Hillel says that earth was created first before heaven. In a sense, and who's the person in between who disagrees or who throws out both of them? Rosh Bar he's the troublemaker in that story who asked both. Right? Okay? Now, what are they arguing about in the machloket, about whether heaven or earth was created first? What's more important? That's what I thought also. But you know what? The Medrash doesn't stop with the machloket. I used to always say that machloket is about what's more important, heaven or earth. But it's got to be the wrong pshat. Because right after that in the Medrash it says that they each gave a reason. And Beit Shammai's reason was, you make the throne and then you make the footstool. So for that it works. The throne's more important than the footstool. But Beit Hillel's reason was, first you make the foundation, then you make the palace. What's more important, the foundation or the palace?
What's more necessary?
The palace is obviously more important. The whole reason you're doing it is to build a palace. You're not interested in foundation is only the context for the palace. So it's not. Beit Hillel agrees that Shammai is more important.
It can exist independent of.
But in terms of cause and effect, in terms of what brings what produces what. So Beit Hillel, who's the Lo b'Shamayim hi school, says human action, human behavior, the imperfect reality of human experience interacting with the Torah is what creates the spiritual reality. It creates the paltin. It creates the palace. Shemayim is built on Aretz. Beit Shammai says no. Truth flows down. And our job here is to simply to implement the objective truth from heaven. That's our job. Shemayim was created first. Rosh Bar Yochai comes along and says, now, Rosh Bar Yochai doesn't come in as a third opinion. He says, I don't even know what they're arguing. I can't believe they're arguing about this. Rather, this. So my pshat is, I think, a very simple pshat. I think it's got to be the pshat in that line, which is that basically the reason, had the Medrash just brought him in as a third opinion, it would mean that he's part of a three-way machloket. Rather, Rosh Bar Yochai is saying, I disagree with the whole premise of the machloket. I disagree with the premise of the machloket. That one of them is the vehicle for the other. Or one of them is causing the other. He says, rather, they're a unity completely. They're just two parts of the same thing, and they do a single job together. They facilitate each other, that's it. He says, I disagree with the premise of what they're arguing about.
I suggest a different answer, maybe?
Later. Let me finish. Okay? Now let's go to the second. Okay, go ahead right now. Quick.
Okay, so...
You gotta make it quick.
So Beit Shammai says that... so the machlok is Beit Shammai... So, okay, Rishon... Now you're telling me to be quick. I'm not doing this.
Okay, so we'll get you later.
Wait.
No, okay, go ahead.
Okay, Rishon Bar Yochai is saying, I don't understand... I think it's both together. You have to take the din and you have to take the Rachman, and there's different shades of truth. is where you should set it.
But saying, is that really as symbiotic as a lid and a pot that were made as one thing that they were then divided? I'm not so sure what you're saying fits as well as what I said.
Truth and...
Okay. Next medrash, we said, was that really weird one. Adam, did you figure it out? The medrash was, Beit Shammai says, Machshava is at night, Maisa is during the day. Beit Hillel says, Machshava and Maisa are during the day. And Rosh Hashanah says, what are they talking about? What? Machshava and Maisa are both... Machshava is during the night and the day, and Maisa is at Din Dumei Chama. Okay? Now, I asked a few people over the last couple of days what they thought of this medrash to give me their thoughts. Rabbi Simkovich had a pshat. Do I have a piece of paper he gave me? Rabbi Simkovich's notes on this medrash are as follows, and he took a completely different approach than I did. So I'm just going to share with you what he said. He said that according to Beit Shammai, the idea is prior to the cosmos, because night is prior to day. Erev Vayerev Vayivoker. Beit Hillel says that the idea and the cosmos are sort of symbiotic in a yin-yang kind of way. They're kind of like... And that Rishon Bar Yochai says that he's introducing the Kabbalistic view, which is what we call tzimtzum. Dimdumei Chama is a very short period of time. It's not part of the day or the night. That was the way he put it. And then he said, Beit Hillel is viewing things as integrated, so that the Machshava and the Maisa are in the same time period. Beit Shammai is viewing things as semi-Platonic. The idea is separate from the action. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the Kabbalistic view. That's Rabbi Simkovich's view of the Machloket. Okay. Here's how I took a completely different approach to the Machloket, because I wanted to fit it in with this whole idea of Beit Shammai taking the more idealistic truth view, the godly perspective, and Beit Hillel taking the perspective of the human experience. Okay? And here's how I understand this medrash. That day and night in this medrash, that this medrash is not actually about the creation of the world, but it's about the ongoing governance of the world. It's about the ongoing creation. It's about the way the world is run. And the world is heading towards something. The world is... Now what's machshava? Machshava is a preparation. Rav Kook says in many places that night serves as a reflective and preparatory time. What do human beings do at night? They rest up so that they can function the next day. The time for activity in the world is daytime. So I understand this medrash in the following way. That Beit Shammai says, when it looks like there's nothing happening in the world, or when it looks dark, when it looks like, when the world seems to be governed by evil, when it is the dark times, when it is night, and it looks like the world is not progressing toward its goal, that's when it's actually in a latent kind of preparing way. If a person didn't know what was going on in the world and saw a human being sleeping, they wouldn't think they're preparing. You just see inaction. You see inactivity. Nighttime looks like nothing's happening, but beneath the surface there's preparation. So nighttime, during the dark times, it looks like the world's not going towards its goal. There are times in history where it looks like the world's not progressing toward its goal. That's night. Beit Shammai says, even during those times, it is beneath the surface. You can't see it. It's preparation. It's machshava. The daytime is the time when things are progressing toward the goal in an overt sense. It's the time of action. Beit Shammai, that's Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel says, no. When times are bad, we're looking at things from the human perspective. When it looks like the world is not progressing toward its goal, it's not. There are times when it's not progressing toward its goal. During the day is when all the progress happens. When it looks like things are progressing toward the goal, that's when they're progressing. And Rosh Hashanah comes along and says, no. When we're in a bad period, or we're in a good period that is somewhat static, when we're in those periods where we've arrived at some sort of plateau, a negative plateau, a positive plateau. When does the world progress toward its goal? At moments of transition. When things transition.
Flashes of transition.
When there's a transition, wars, upheaval. At moments of transition, that's when the world is, progresses toward its goal. Even if it looks like it's transitioning from something good to bad, from something bad to good, that's when things move forward. That's how I understand this medrash. Free to write your own perush, but I want to share with you what's my thoughts on it. The last medrash, and then we'll sum up with, we'll finish with a pshat in the Amat HaBinyan. I'll share with you 2 pshats in it. Last medrash is the medrash about the formation of a baby. Beit Shammai said the formation of a baby will change in the world to come. Beit Hillel said it won't. Beit Shammai said, and they both agree that in this world there is first flesh and skin, and it's finished up with bones and sinews. And Beit Shammai says that will be reversed in the world to come. I discussed this with Adrian, and we came up with something. And this is basically the pshat that I came up with in my discussion with Adrian. It's a nice pshat. I sent it over to Rav Herzog, and he loved it. He loved it. He was like, I like that pshat. Like it. Something like that. Here's the pshat we came up with. The flesh and the skin is the external. It's the external form that you see. You don't see people's sinews and bones when you look at them. But the system that the flesh and bone is given life and form by the bones and the sinews. So, in this world, the way things happen is that the ideas, we don't see the actual workings, the actual, the bones and the sinews, which represent the inside and the inner workings and what's actually making things go, what's actually giving it form. We don't really see it. We only see the externals, and then afterwards we deduce, as we learn and as we grow and as we understand more and more, we deduce what's really going on beneath the surface. So we start with the flesh and we finish with the bones and the sinews. But in the end of days, when the truth is clear to all, says Beit Shammai, when everyone has the godly perspective, everyone will be able to see. You'll just be able to look and see the inner workings of everything. You'll understand it all. And then, as you get to know reality on the surface, you'll be able to fit it all in and say, oh yeah, that fits into the system this way, and that fits into the system this way. So your understanding of the externals will simply fit into what you already know about the inner workings of things. That was the way we understood it. Beit Shammai is saying that there will be a switch to a godly perspective. And Beit Hillel says, no, there won't. Human beings will still be human beings with their human perspective on things. They still have to learn in the same way. That's the way I understood that medrash there. The running theme with all of these things is that Beit Hillel taking the human perspective, which is an imperfect perspective, and that's why it involves chesed and rachamim. So the aspect of anava, the compromise on truth that comes with it. Here he's telling the guy, go ahead and convert to become the Kohen Gadol, but then the guy can't. It seems like he's lying. Rabbi Shua also with that same approach, seeming like he's lying, because it takes into account its lo b'shamayim perspective. It's the human activity with all of its imperfections, but that's where the palace of Shamayim is built. It's built on the human experience. Whereas Beit Shammai is saying, no. Life is an exercise in trying to attain the the objective truth of the perception of God, and there should be no compromises on that. So that we have the kapdanut, the insistence on truth, but also trying to say because the real truth is God's perspective. So that is what we're meant to try to attain. That's the more Beit Shammai approach. Now, the Amat HaBinyan, he pushes him away with the measuring stick. I'd like to share with you 2 pshat that I've seen about this. Put your hand up. You'll ask afterwards. 2 pshat. The first pshat is a pshat that I went over to my dad and I said, what do you think about Beit Shammai Beit Hillel from the philosophical standpoint? He said, I only heard one thing in my life about this. I said, okay, what'd you hear? He said, I heard it from Rav Yisrael Parat. The Shana Bet guys might remember me talking about Rav Yisrael Parat during your Shana Bet Shabbos beginning of the year. He was my sandik. I sat on his lap when I was 8 days old. Rav Yisrael Parat was a very close Talmud of Rav Kook. Rav Kook, in one of a number of the letters of Rav Kook in the Igrot are written to Rav Yisrael Parat. Rav Kook once described him and Rav Yisrael Parat and Rav Yaakov Moshe Chalap as his 2 closest students. He was a very close student of, I'm not going to give you a whole biography of Rav Yisrael Parat. He was a fascinating man, a gadol, a batorah, and like I said, a Talmid Chaver, a very, very close Talmud of Rav Kook. And I was zocher to have him as my sandik. I never met. I met him. Of course, I met him. I sat on his lap, but I never met him. I don't know what he looks like. There's a section of the Rav Kook library in Yerushalayim devoted to Rav Kook's relationship with Rav Yisrael Parat. So my father said, he said, I once heard Rav Parat. He was giving a speech, and he mentioned, almost as an offhand remark, he said, what does it mean that Beit Shammai pushed this person away? He mentioned that story, and he says, oh, by the way, I have a nice little pshat. He says, what does it mean that Beit Shammai pushed the person away with a measuring stick? He said, well, you should know. Beit Hillel. He said, Hillel's job. Hillel, what was Hillel's job? Anyone know what Hillel's job was? Hillel was a woodcutter. He was a wood chopper. That was his job. Before he became, the Nasi. Hillel was a wood chopper. Anyone know what Shammai's job was?
Shammai.
He was a builder. But he was like a surveyor. He was a Shammai. Shammai is a nickname. A Shammai in modern Hebrew. There are people in Israel who have a job. A Shammai is what we call an assessor. You guys know what an assessor is?
Hillel is the one who does
an
the
assessor.
foundation stuff.
No.
He's the one who builds up.
No, listen to what Rav Parat said. Rav Parat said, a wood chopper doesn't really care how big each piece of wood is. It doesn't really matter. It's an inch bigger, an inch smaller. It's chopping wood, firewood. It's a wood chopper. It doesn't have to be so medayik. But if you're an assessor, if you're involved in the building, not as a guy putting mortar on, if you're like the architect, you're a builder, you're in charge of the building project, you use an amat habinyan. If you're building something and the piece of wood that you put in a specific spot is an inch too short, it's unusable. You need to get a new piece of you can't use it. Things have to be in a building. Things have to be precise. So he says when it says that he pushed them away by amat habinyan, he was basically saying, you can't have all these ulterior motives. Teach me the whole Torah on 1 foot, or I want to be Kohen Gadol. Like, if you're not right, or like in the story with Rabbi Gamliel, Kol Misha Ein Tocha Kavaro, whoever isn't consistent, the Shammai approach, you can't come in. So he pushed him away with the building stick. That's what Rav Parat said. Rav Kook, his Rebbe, in Ein Ayah says something completely different. In Ein Ayah on Shabbat, Rav Kook says something very powerful here. I'm going to say it outside because the hour is late. It's a very, very good piece. If anyone wants to learn with me inside sometime next week, maybe Tuesday night when we learn Rav Kook, we'll learn this piece of Rav Kook inside. It's going to be Yom Yerushalayim. We'll talk about that some other time, what we're going to do Yom Yerushalayim. Rav Kook says as follows. He says, when a guy wants to learn Torah on one leg, what does it mean? It means he's impatient. But a guy wants to learn Torah, he wants to become Jewish. So what does that mean? He's inspired. This person became inspired. It says he was walking by the Beis Medrash. Or whatever inspired this person to want to become Jewish. He was legitimately inspired to become Jewish. But he was impatient about it. So he wanted to learn it all right away. He said, what's the problem with that? He said, you cannot appreciate the fullness of Torah unless you learn it and you live it. And you have to learn it and live it over a long period of time to appreciate it. listen carefully, guys, because there's some people in this room who are dealing with this every day. You cannot be inspired. There's no get-rich-quick scheme to being inspired in Torah. You can't just... Some rabbi is going to say the magic words and sprinkle the magic dust on me and I'm going to be inspired. It does not work that way. It says the way to truly be inspired to Torah is a slow, deliberate process. And it takes time, and it's not so easy to get there. That's the real inspiration. It takes time. He says, this guy wants to learn the whole Torah on one foot. Beit Shammai says it doesn't work that way. There's no get-rich-quick scheme. And he says, Rav Kook says, if a builder takes out the measuring stick to measure what's built, and all there is the empty lot of land with no building on it, there's nothing to measure. You have to build a house first. Then you have something to measure. So there's nothing there. So he kicks him out. Hillel says, you know what? This guy's impatient. Someone who's starting out who knows nothing, doesn't know any Torah at all, what can I inspire him with? He's not going to be inspired by all the spiritual stuff and by mitzvot, because to be inspired by those, you have to do them, and you have to learn them. And that takes a long period of time. You can't be inspired by them by just being told about mitzvot. But anyone can understand the value of being nice to someone else and not being a jerk. So that level of inspiration is the level he's at. So you know what? At his level, the entry-level Torah is, don't be a jerk to other people. Be nice. The rest of the Torah is a perush, go learn. Says Rav Kook. What he was saying to him is, that's your starting point. That's where you're at now. So for you right now, that's the inspiration I'm going to give you. Is that truth? Is that the whole Torah? No. But remember, this is not the Shammai school. This is you deal with the imperfect reality you have in front of you. Human ethics between people, that's like entry-level religion. The most basic form of ethics. The fact that even our most obscure mitzvot are also ethics and are also inspirational, you don't get that on the first glance. You can't get that on one foot. Right? Hillel doesn't start telling him divrei Torah about how cool tefillin are and how great it is to daven mincha. He doesn't bother with that. That's not going to help this guy. That's not where he's at. Someone who's been studying and doing mitzvah for a long time, yeah, then I can get involved with him in discussions of these things, and it'll have something to have a context. So when Hillel says, you want to learn the Torah on one foot, you don't know anything, be a nice person. That's the entry level of Torah. Is it true that it's the entire Torah? No. Not in an objective, godly sense. But for this person, that's his way in. But Hillel takes the imperfect human experience and builds from there. These are my thoughts on this whole issue. At this point, I think as time goes on, I'll continue to learn more. And if you disagree with something, I'll be happy to hear it. I feel like I'm just beginning this sugya. There is also, for the purpose of honesty, there is one major agadic machloka between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel that I did not touch yet, because it looks like a whole shaklavatari that I have to get through, and that is Beit Shammai, the very famous Maimar Chazal, you guys have probably heard in Hebrew school, that on Rosh Hashanah, the perfect tzaddikim go into the book of life, and the perfect Rishonim go into the book of death, and everyone else waits until Yom Kippur. That's Beit Shammai. That's Beit Shammai's opinion in a machloka Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel disagrees with that. And Beit Hillel has this long speech he gives. I mean, a long speech for a medrash. He says something, he quotes a couple of psukim, and this whole thing about chesed from Hashem. And I think it requires study in terms of what psukim are being quoted and what happens in that. So I didn't want to touch it because it looks like a more complicated issue. But I think ultimately we'll fit in with this. But I hope you enjoy this year.